Tuesday, the second day of the week, technically. That's why it was called that. We all know, I'll hear no arguments. We appreciate you guys joining us. Again, especially this time of year, the show is extra jam-packed. Got a great one for you. But before we start, David, we were talking about some of the tiebreaker scenarios and looking like even further down the rabbit hole. And I believe it was the SEC that has the capped scoring margin. And it's the fifth, so the odds of it getting down there aren't great. But, I mean, every week it seems like the SEC is going to have 9, 10, and 2 teams in it. So can you explain to the people what a capped scoring margin?
Well, we did this breakout for all the conference tiebreakers last week, and one of you guys had the SEC, and you mentioned point differential. So I wanted to pull this up based off the Alabama and LSU result that we saw. And point E, the fifth point, is capped relative scoring margin versus all conference opponents among the tied teams. So that's all that it says right there when you go down the list of the tiebreakers. But in the Appendix A, it has a whole page on what the capped relative scoring margin is, because it doesn't just say point differential. It doesn't just add up all the points you scored against your conference and all the points you gave up like you would think.
It'd be way too easy.
This is an entire page, which maybe we should screenshot this and actually put this out so people can see it. But it's so convoluted. I mean, basically at the end of the season, each of the conference will be evaluated based on the team's average scoring offense and defense. So just to try and condense this the best I possibly can, if in week A, team A defeats team B by a score of 31-28, and at the end of the season, that B team averaged 24 points scored per game for the season, then at the end of the year, team B averaged 21 points allowed per game for the season. They're going to subtract how many points that team averaged from how many you beat them by. So team A scored 10 more points against team B than they allowed on average. 31 minus 21 equals 10. So divide 10 by 21, you get a scoring margin of 47.6. Then if team A allowed 4 more points than team B scored on average, you'd get minus 4. So divide minus 4 by 24, that gives us a defensive margin of minus 16.7. You have to combine that, so it's 30.9 for Team A, and repeat this process for every single conference game.
It's just like in high school when they said I would need trigonometry.
But
90% of people.
I'm not Oppenheimer. We're not building the atom bomb. Can we just make this?
Just do point differential. Why can't we just do that?
But that's why. It brings us back to the LSU Alabama game. Right?
Yeah.
That could come into play.
And then at the very end, it says, note on cap. In this example, if Team A had scored more than 42 points, their offensive margin would exceed 100%. Due to the built-in cap, their offensive margin would be designated as 100% for the game. And the same principle applies on defense. If Team A had allowed more than 48 points, their defensive margin would fall below minus 100, which is the cap. So due to that cap, their defensive margin would be designed or designated as minus 100% for the game.
I
have no idea what that means.
Well, we're basically trying to answer the question, do style points matter? And in this case, it can be confusing and convoluted, which it is. They could have made it a lot easier, which they didn't. But we're saying this because Brian Kelly got pissed at the end of the Bama game because Bama was still bringing extra guys. But style points matter.
Well, do they? I mean,
I guess.
It's either take a point differential and have it as your fifth point and hope you never get there, at which case Ole Miss scoring 63 points on Arkansas matters, and you run it up on teams and all this kind. And we've seen it in the Big 12 a couple years ago. I think Dave Aranda was involved in a field goal or something like that. I can't remember the details. Or take it out completely and you don't run it up on teams like Mississippi State.
Yeah.
But what does it mean that you're going to take a relative scoring margin, but you're going to cap it at 42 points scored and 48 points allowed?
Can I ask this question? Is the tiebreaker right after this flip a coin?
It
is F flip a coin?
Random draw.
Yeah. So they got to the point where somebody was reading this, was like, they're like, gee, all right, Craig, you can keep that in there, but for the love of God, when we get, if for some reason that side, can we just draw sticks like the end of Armageddon?
To me. Nothing about that makes sense to me.
I don't know why we make that so confusing.
It seems like you want the best of both worlds. You want to take a point differential, but you don't want teams to run it up on the weakest teams in the conference and make them look bad, so you try and cap it. That's the only thing I can come up with.
Just do the point differential. Goodness gracious. Matt Moscona is going to join us to discuss LSU's future after the beatdown by Alabama. Ole Miss looks to handle prosperity after finally getting it with the win over Georgia, and we're going to break down our top 12 college football teams for this week as the playoff rankings get revealed tonight. I'm Jake Crain. It's a Tuesday, so let's turn this bad boy up here at Crain & Company. Ole Miss finally caught the big one. Kiffin captured his great white buffalo, and Rebel fans should be as excited as ever. But the truth is the hardest part for Ole Miss is still ahead, and I'm not just talking about the postseason. Now that they have prosperity, can they handle it? What does the dog do when he actually catches the car? Even when David slayed Goliath, they still had to run the village, and Ole Miss should probably change their pronouns to stay focused for these next 3 weeks. You can't slip up in these last 2 games. You're going into a bye week. And you're in the college football playoff with a chance to host if you're clean. You got a better team than Florida and Mississippi State. Nobody's going to argue that. But if you think you can just roll your helmet out there and win, you will be let down. Go watch the film of the Kentucky game. Now, in a postseason tournament format, it's not just if you get hot, but it's when you get hot that matters the most, and the Rebs are hotter than a Victoria's Secret show on the sun right now. But it all can fall apart if you don't attack this bye week right and don't attack the next 2 games like your playoff life depends on it. Because in reality, it does. So congrats to Ole Miss. That was a hell of a win. I'm happy for your fan base. But it's what you do next that will ultimately define you. David Cohn, former Michigan quarterback, my brother, former Western State, Colorado wide receiver. David, when you look at this Ole Miss team and the way they're playing right now, I mean, you could say that Ole Miss and South Carolina are 2 of the hottest teams in the country. The difference is Ole Miss has 2 losses, South Carolina has 3. But do you think Lane Kiffin's team is going to be mature enough to handle not just going out there and winning, you have to win, but continuing to play well and play? Most likely you're not going to the SEC championship game. So you're trying to put yourself in the best position to host a college football playoff game and get into the college football playoff. Do you think Ole Miss can handle prosperity with Lane?
Well, only the people in that building can decide that. You know, I know a lot of people are split on Ole Miss right now, and I am too, because the 2 losses, the Kentucky loss didn't look great at the time, and it looks less and less good. Like, it looks even worse now with Kentucky at 3-6. And really, the Ole Miss, the LSU loss on the road at night didn't look terrible at the time, but it looks less good after what Alabama did to them, and LSU is now out of consideration, I believe, for the college football playoff. At the same time, what you just did to Georgia, getting over that hump, finally beating Kirby Smart, a team that went on the road and beat the number 1 team in the country at the time, Texas. Obviously, that's a feather in the cap, not just for Lane Kiffin for this year to stay alive, but that was sort of one of those wins we needed. That was his James Franklin moment over the Buckeyes that James Franklin wasn't able to get. If Ole Miss is able, after that loss to LSU, we said if they can win those 5 games in a row, that included the win they just had at Georgia, and you still have to win the Egg Bowl, even though Mississippi State's not great, have to beat Florida, all this kind of stuff. If they can win those 5 games in a row, I do think they will be worthy of a college football playoff appearance, and they have the potential to be such a balanced team, which I think is very impressive. They have the potential to play really good on defense in games and then play really good on offense, like the performance that we saw against Arkansas. So that alone, I think, is going to help them with the eye test. I think the strength of schedule is going to help them. And look, I just think all around they have the capability of being a really good football team. Will they slip up at Florida? Yeah. Will they slip up against their rival, Mississippi State, which is sort of an unforgivable loss this year? I think only the players in that locker room can answer that.
Yeah, and blame the mission for, and I think sometimes people, and I think Penn State's the same way, they get confused on what exactly the mission is. The mission wasn't solely to finally win that big game, to finally beat, Georgia, get over the hump, Bama, whatever. It was to win that big game, to propel you to a place you haven't been, and then go have success there. If you can get through that first door, you can probably get through that second door.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And the reason this team is different this year in Ole Miss is because the way they're built. Ole Miss is almost built defensively this year. Right now, Ole Miss is ranked sixth in the nation in total points given up on defense. If I'd have sat here and said that before the year, I'd have been amazed. The scariest thing that could happen in college football, and Lane Kiffin's always been in that type of group of coaches. The Lincoln Rileys. You'll always sport an offense when you're with Lane Kiffin. And what they did with Georgia, they did it without who? Trey Harris. Right now, their leading receiver, not only for Ole Miss, but in the nation. Ole Miss is probably the most dangerous team in college football right now because the way they're built is defensively. If Ole Miss can sport a defense, Jackson Dart can stay healthy, Trey Harris and all these weapons they have on offense, they can run with anybody in the nation. The key piece for this entire thing, and we've talked about this for years, especially you, and you said it earlier this year, if Ole Miss can put a defense out there that is good enough, Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, from a schematic standpoint, getting his guys in successful opportunities are good enough to make a run and can walk with anybody. With anybody for 4 quarters on a football field. Mm-hmm. What you saw against Georgia wasn't Lane Kiffin finessing for a win. That wasn't that. That was an Ole Miss defense beating up a Georgia and Kirby Smart football team, and we're not used to seeing that.
No, and we've looked across the country and we've said, all right, there really isn't, and I guess you can make the argument for Oregon that they're turning into it, a team that we feel like is super elite in all 3 phases. Just a team that is the Thanos of college football this year, that is so much more dominant than the rest. Everybody else is going to have to punch above their weight in multiple phases to beat them. So as we were looking for that, we said, all right, which teams have an elite side of the ball? Like a really good side of the ball. We talk about Tennessee defense. We talk about Ole Miss's defense. We talk about, you even look at a team like Iowa. If they could ever put an offense together, they'd be a pretty damn good football team as well. But it's who has the growth in their weakness. We've talked about Tennessee. How much growth potential is there on offense with this elite defense heading toward the playoff? Who can get the momentum with their left hand, dribbling with their left going into the playoff? And come to the point you brought up a second ago, when I look at Ole Miss, and we've never really questioned the offense, and that's kind of what we were questioning for a while and didn't question the defense. If I'm looking at growth potential on what's been your weakness, which I think's been the offense this year, it's hard to make a case that Ole Miss doesn't have the most growth potential on their weakest side of the ball.
No doubt. And I want to save some of this for our top 12 that we're doing in the next segment, because we're going to get into an interesting discussion on what's better, to have beaten some really good teams, but you slip up with a bad loss here or there, or to beat all the teams you're supposed to, but then you have lost against the best competition you're going to face. So I want to save this conversation for that, but Ole Miss is right there in that, right? Like the Kentucky loss is not great, but then you have the win over Georgia. And so when we get to that segment, I want to discuss whether or not it's better to have flipped that, for the wins and losses that Ole Miss has. But yeah, balance right now on both sides of the football, obviously coming off a very impressive win. Now let's go see how good Georgia is with their back against the wall at Tennessee. Does your win over them look better this next week if they beat Tennessee, or does Georgia sort of slide off and they're out of consideration?
No, it's a great point. Speaking about getting to, we're going to get to the chat in a second, but if you want to get to a live sporting event, or maybe a concert, or any type of live event, there's only one entity you need to go to. It's the first time I've ever used the word entity. I've been looking at a thesaurus a lot lately. It's the Game Time app. And again, it's not just for sports. You can get tickets up to an hour before the event. And the beautiful part is they filter out all the fluff. They give you the best deals. They give you the opportunity to view what your view would look like from the seat before you even go there or make that purchase. It is time saving. We talk about working smarter, not harder, and Game Time is the absolute best representation of that when it comes to taking the guesswork out of buying tickets. It's really easy to get there too. You download the Game Time app from the App Store. It's easy to find. You create an account and you use code BOOSTER, BOOSTER, for $20 off your first purchase. Again, download the app, create an account, redeem code BOOSTER, get that $20 off. Doesn't matter. We're here in Nashville. We got the Preds, the Titans, Vanderbilt, live concerts all the time, wherever. You need to check out this app. I guarantee you the first time you use it, use that code BOOSTER. You won't just be back one time. You'll be back over and over and over again. So download the Game Time app today. What time is it, fellas?
Game time.
Game time.
Somebody get excited about something. All right, let's get to the chat.
All right, let's go to a $5 donation from the Rebel Man. He says, what else does Ole Miss have to do to prove that they are a playoff-worthy football team?
I mean, you just got to keep handling business. We were looking at the math, and I know it can get constrained here, and we're going to get into that when we do our top 12 with Notre Dame. But I think having that feather in the cap win over Georgia, now you're a huge Georgia fan if you're Ole Miss. You're a big LSU fan if you're Ole Miss. You want LSU to finish 9-3. You want Georgia to finish 10-2 because if you want to talk about eliminating teams that you'd have to go up against to get in the college football playoff, you know a great way to eliminate them? Have the tiebreaker in the head-to-head. Because when you look at all the tie-breaking rules in the ACC, the Big Ten, the SEC, and the Big 12, what's the first bullet that pops up? It's head-to-head. The committee is praying, I promise you, that it comes down to just picking a head-to-head win over another team because it takes it out of their hands and it makes it blatantly obvious. So they've proven it to me. You just got to keep handling business.
Let's go to Rico. He says, J-Boy, what about that name? So did you think Ole Miss defense was going to be this good before the year started?
Yeah, I thought they were going to be pretty damn good. I mean, here at this show, we were the only one of them, to ride with Ole Miss before the season, and then it kind of fell off for a little bit, and they were able to come back. We were one of the only people in the college sports media space that were saying we don't think Lane Kiffin would just run to Florida the first chance he gets because Ole Miss is building something, and once you have proven that you can build it, why would I leave it? If I'm the king of England back in the day, and people say, oh, you can't build a castle that big. You can't build. And then I build it. I'm not going to go to France and hang out. I'm going to stick my ass in the castle that I just built. So I think this is vindication for Lane Kiffin staying at Ole Miss. You heard him talk about it, about not going to Auburn with his family after they beat Georgia. I think this is vindication for Ole Miss, and I think this is going to keep Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss probably for the rest of his career. I don't think he wants to go to the NFL. So, and I'm happy for that. I like seeing people move up. I like seeing that. I like seeing Will Smith in The Pursuit of Happiness get the damn job at the brokerage or whatever he was working at. I like to see Ole Miss move from the suburbs to an estate with a pool and a gate. There's something about seeing somebody that hadn't done it, do it. That's why I always root for these underdogs. I mean, that's why I'm Team Army, guys. I'm Team Army the rest of the way in the
great team.
Well, the thing about the analogy with building the castle in college football, you have to do it every year, especially in the era of the transfer portal. So it's not like Lane Kiffin can just do this one time and Ole Miss has a great team every year. He's got to build the castle every year. So the only consideration would be, man, is it easier to build a castle somewhere else than it is to do that at Ole Miss? But now that he already has done that for this year, don't you think you have to do more than just go 10-2, not make the SEC championship game, and get put out in the first round of an expanded 12-team playoff?
Yes, I think there's positives to take out of this team, but this is not going just 10-2 and winning one big game was not why this team was built like
exactly.
This. Not why this team was anointed. So I agree with you 100%. And again, as much as they relied on the transfer portal, we have seen, if you drive down to Tallahassee right now, it's a much different look with this transfer portal class than it was the year before. So I do agree you have to build it over and over again. But I think it's different once you have built it once at a place that really hadn't had it. Like Florida State's won before. They've won big. I saw them beat Auburn in the national championship game. I've never seen Ole Miss get to this point where you're like, all right, this is a complete team that could actually do some damage. But to your point, I think there would be disappointment if this team most likely is not going to make the SEC championship game and goes and gets put out in the first round. I think the expectations are higher than that. It's just now that you got through this first door, like I was saying to Blaine, I feel like you could get through the second. But,
actually, I'll take it a step further. I don't know if Ole Miss would have beaten Georgia this past weekend if it weren't for the possibility of staying alive for a college football playoff.
That's a great point.
And what I mean by that is, in all the years past with a 14 playoff, there's no way that an Ole Miss team with 2 losses halfway through the season to LSU and to Kentucky would have been in consideration for one of those 4 playoffs. We're just assuming that you're still alive in an expanded 12-team playoff. Georgia would have been very much alive with only 1 loss in a 14 playoff. I wonder if a different Georgia team would have come to Oxford, and I wonder if they would have been met by a different Ole Miss team in Oxford had we still been in a 14 playoff era.
Well, the back against the wall teams, to your point, have done really, really well. Yeah. The only time where a team with their back against the wall, and I'm talking about Notre Dame too, after losing to Northern Illinois, they've run the table. So the only game where you've had a team that didn't come through with their back against the wall was really Bama and LSU because they both had their backs against the wall. Somebody's got to win. Somebody's got to lose. All right, one more and we got to move.
All right, let's go to Pork Rinds. He says Ole Miss could be a one-trick pony. They might not even make the playoffs.
See, that's bullshit. You're wrong. What's his name?
Pork Rind.
That's the total difference in this Ole Miss team. They're not a one-trick pony. You are taking the exactly wrong way to look at this. The reason why they finally beat Georgia is because they didn't have to trick them at all, but they're not a one-trick pony. I can make the case that if you're going to make the argument they're a one-trick pony, it was on defense, but now the offense has figured it out. You're going about this the totally wrong way and misreading it. This Ole Miss team is doing this because they're not a one-trick pony. When they were having to win games 45-42 and 38-35, they were a one-trick pony. I couldn't disagree with you more. You're probably a Mississippi State fan. There's nothing wrong with it. All right, let's move on to our top 12, the perfect top 12 in college football. And I do want to preface this because, again, guys, we can make fun of the committee all we want. They do not have an easy job at all. So what we did was put together who we think our top 12 teams are. Not you have to have a group of 5 team in there or this, that, and the other. Our top 12 teams right now with our first 4 out. There's a little bracketology for you. If you're on audio, here's the list. All right, starting from 1 to 12, then I'll give you the first 4. Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, BYU 3, Indiana 4, Tennessee 5, Notre Dame 6, Texas 7, Penn State 8, Bama 9, Ole Miss 10, Miami 11, and Georgia 12. Our first 4 out in order, Boise State, SMU, A&M, and yes, Colorado is right there. I can't believe that graphic is up this late in the year, but shout out to Dion on what they're doing. David, I want to kick it over to you first because when we were all explaining this, what we wanted to do was have a methodology that was consistent. And I know people will look at this and say, man, BYU at 3 and Indiana at 4, you're just trying to get everybody pissed off. But can you tell the people why that we did that?
Yeah, so a couple things here. One, you can't create a list at this point for college football that is uncriticizable.
Yes.
One, because all of the metrics are subjective, right? It's not like the NFL or the MLB where you just win your division. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you're worse than the 3rd best team in another division, you're still going to get in and the wild cards are easy. All of this is subjective, right? So that's why it's going to be criticizable. And 2, because the college football teams so far have made it as difficult as possible. Everyone's either beaten someone other than Oregon at number 1 right now. You either have you don't have a great win or you have a really bad loss. But that doesn't mean that we can't give you, the listeners at home, at least ammunition to be able to argue your points as good as possible. Now, maybe when you make your own list at home, maybe it'll be a little bit different. Actually, I would probably bet that it would be different, either a team here or there, or maybe completely different. But let's at least still try and agree on a few points. And some of the ones that we were talking about earlier when we were making this list are, how do you value, one, obviously being undefeated, where you've won all your games. And in the case of, say, like Indiana, you've won all your games fairly handedly. I mean, the game got close against a Michigan team that's not great right now. But other than that, they've beaten people pretty badly. And then how do you weigh teams that have no great win? So you got your chance against a good opponent and you lost. So that to me right now is Penn State. Okay, Penn State got the Buckeyes, they lost. Texas, you got a chance against Georgia, you lost. Versus teams like Tennessee and Notre Dame, and really a little bit of what we were talking about with Ole Miss, even though they have 2 losses. But let's just start with Tennessee and Notre Dame. You got your chance against great competition and won. Notre Dame, great win against Texas A&M on the road to open the season. Tennessee, you beat Alabama at home, but then you slipped up against weaker competition. Tennessee obviously losing at Arkansas, and then Notre Dame has one of the worst losses against Northern Illinois we can remember. So how do we weigh all of those things? Beating everybody, beating the teams you're supposed to, but losing against the best teams and having no great win versus you have a great win, but then you also have some terrible losses.
No, and again, it all goes, that spider web all goes into making this ranking. And just quickly, and the undefeated point. If you look, the top 4 teams, right, 3 of the 4 are undefeated. You have to weigh that. I know the schedule hasn't been fantastic, but that BYU win over SMU is looking a lot better, right? And they're going to get their shot to continue to go undefeated. And if they go undefeated, they're going to be a top 4 team when these rankings come out anyway because they're going to win the Big 12. Indiana's going to get their shot. You are going to get your shot to prove if we should have you at number 4 or if you're just a team that can beat some good teams and some okay teams, but you can't take that next step. They play Ohio State next weekend. So we're going to get to find out. Tennessee at number 5 is going to play number 12 Georgia on the road this week. All right, you look at what we could have coming down the pipe in the SEC championship game possibly, right? Because you look at Texas, the rest of their schedule, they're going to get a shot against A&M, which in turn gets their shot against Texas. So there's a lot that's going to come out. But when it comes down to a methodology, I mean, I think we got about as close as humanly possible because we had Miami at number 3 last week. So we value being undefeated. Do we think the ACC is the best conference in the country? No, we don't. But at this point in the year, if you're undefeated, that says something, and then we're going to get some great matchups down the stretch here. So I know if you look around the country, there's a million ways you can splice this, dice it up, slice it up, whatever, and have a logical, rational explanation. But coming down the pipe, I think we grouped them together right. Because again, if you look at Ohio State, right, their one loss is on the road to the number one team that's undefeated by a point. I think that can justify them being it too. And then again, I mentioned BYU and Indiana. Tennessee, you're going to get a chance to stay there or move up depending on what happens in front of you with what you do against Georgia. Notre Dame, you're one loss away from being out. I think you're one loss away from being totally out.
Well, the thing about it, can you look at BYU and can you look at Indiana and say that they passed the eye test? I think so.
I think so. To a certain extent, as much as you can without them playing an elite.
I feel like you can put those teams up against most of those teams in the top 12, and it would be a good football game. A good football game. There won't be a lot of double-digit spreads, maybe against Indiana or Alabama. How good do you really think Penn State is?
I think Penn State is a really good football team. When I watch you play in your one big game of the year, your biggest game of the year, and you run and hide on offense, that scares me that you don't believe in what your guys can do if you're going to call plays like that if you're Andy Kotelnicki.
If Indiana loses that game against Ohio State, say it's close, say it's a touchdown game, where do you put them?
They get the Miami treatment.
Yeah.
With that week of a schedule, and we've been talking about Missouri like this a lot too, with that week of a schedule, you can't get the benefit of dropping 2 spots, right? Like that's why Miami dropped so far. And just to kind of put a cap on what I was saying earlier for people who weren't in the room while we were making this list, the ultimate deciding factor at the very end when we were weighing undefeated teams versus one-loss teams with no great win versus one-loss teams or even 2-loss teams that have great wins but bad losses is at the very end of it all, we said, okay, how do you apply the eye test of the football team on top of all this? And yeah, we played a little game of who would beat who. Would this team beat that team? And I don't know it for a fact right now that Penn State would beat Indiana. I don't know that.
I don't know that either.
I don't know it for a fact that Texas right now would beat BYU. Maybe they do. Maybe they beat them by 30 points. Maybe BYU beats Texas. And the same with Miami. Like, I don't know for a fact the way Miami's been playing football that they demolish BYU or Indiana. And then even on the Georgia front, like with the 2 losses, Georgia's schedule's not built like everyone else's. Georgia's schedule and Indiana's schedule are not the same. Anybody who understands college football understands that. And I value strength of schedule. But Georgia hasn't offset the 2 losses that they've encountered on that tough road by playing good football. See, if Georgia looked really good right now, but they had 2 losses with that tough schedule, then maybe you could offset it. And even still, we have them in the top 12.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And people will say, oh, well, guys, who is Indiana beaten? Who is BYU beaten? Well, I'll ask you, who is Texas beaten? Indiana's beat the same team that Texas has in Michigan. Right, I know Texas went up there on the road. Who's Penn State beaten? USC looks awful right now. They just made a quarterback change, and now they're under probation and got a $50,000 fine for coaching violations. So to me, at some point, this is why I like blind resumes a little bit too, because we're not going to brand bias here. Right now, do I think the Big Ten and the SEC are the 2 best conferences? Yes, but when it comes down to specificity of the top 12, you can't brand bias. You got to take the team for where they are at that moment in time. And that's what I think we did. But it's going to come down to, and David, you literally just said this, do you value, if you're on that committee, what is the difference between a quality win and a quality loss, and which ones cancels the other out? Mm-hmm. Does a quality win usurp a bad loss, right? Notre Dame beating Texas A&M's quality win, awful loss against Northern Illinois. Does having not beating anybody that's really, really great and your one loss is to a really good team, how do you weigh that versus a team that lost to a bad team but beat a really good team?
So let me put it in question form, and I want to do it with a handful of these teams, 3 specifically. But just real quick on the BYU point. BYU beating SMU on the road 18-15 preseason, that doesn't look like a great win. Right now where we are in the year, that's a great win. Beating SMU, and that's SMU's only loss to this point. And you beat Kansas State 38-9. So those are some pretty solid wins. But let me just put it in question form. Let's just start with Notre Dame. Notre Dame right now, we have it 6. I think, where'd we have them last week? Couple spots?
Yeah, a couple spots.
But we said, hey, there are multiple teams in front of you that are playing each other. And Notre Dame can't get a first 4 bye, but they can host a playoff game in South Bend. They got to win out to do that, I believe. But would Notre Dame be ranked higher, lower, or in the same spot right now if they had lost to Texas A&M? right? They lost to the best team they played, but then they don't have the embarrassing loss against Northern Illinois. They beat them.
Yeah, that's, again, to me, I think there'd be a lot of similarities. I just will tell you, and I want to get to the chat here before Moscona gets on, the playoff committee there is no perfect right answer that's going to come down the pipe. There's not one.
And that's okay.
That's okay.
That's the same thing with March Madness.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to get screwed. Somebody's going to get screwed. It's just the way of the road. You can only skin a cat in so many different ways.
What about Ole Miss? Would Ole Miss be better off right now had they lost to Georgia, ranked higher than them, but they beat Kentucky? So then your two losses are LSU and Georgia.
For sure.
They'd be better off?
Well, I have to go look at the rest of their schedule.
Well, because then they wouldn't. Well, again, it depends on how you weigh it. They wouldn't have a great win, which we're considering Georgia a great win.
Well, how would you weigh that if Indiana loses to Ohio State?
That's why we had somebody in here whose name is Know Thyself and Know Thy Truth. Phenomenal name. Says, how the hell does Indiana get Miami treatment, losing to the number 2 team on the road when Miami lost to Georgia Tech?
Well,
yeah, that's a fair point.
Well, I think he's talking about just dropping them down.
That's
not out.
That's what I meant. Not
not exactly like.
But again, okay. So you guys answer though. If Indiana loses to the only good team they played, again, they would kind of go into the Texas and to the Penn State category a little bit. Would you guys drop them as far as Miami? Where did we have Miami last week? 3?
3.
So they drop, 8 spots? Would Indiana drop that many spots to you guys?
I don't think they would drop as many, but I would value what Ole Miss had done over what Indiana's done to that point. I'd have to put Ole Miss ahead of them.
Would the way that they lose to the Buckeyes matter?
I think it's very important.
I think that's maybe what we should focus on to answer his criticism. Because again, we're talking about, so the Buckeyes lost their biggest game too, right? On the road at Oregon, but they lost on the road by 1 point and sort of offset that a little bit with the Penn State win.
Yeah.
Right? If Indiana goes on the road to the Horseshoe and does the same thing, loses by 1 point to the Buckeyes, maybe that's where you say, well, they don't get the Miami treatment. They only lost by 1. Now, they're not going to get another chance to offset that because they don't get Penn State. They don't get Oregon. They don't get Penn State, right? But if they go and they lose by 45, and that was the best competition you played against, then do they drop that far?
I think it's huge that they play them close, but I still think an 11-1 Indiana is probably going to get the benefit of the doubt in the long run. Like, let me ask you this, David. If let's say Miami finishes 11-1 and, something were to happen, whatever, and they don't make, win the ACC championship, I mean, where do you value them compared to Indiana?
If they don't make
win the ACC championship. Like if they're sitting there and Miami goes 11-1 and loses the ACC championship, goes 11-2, but Indiana goes 11-1 and doesn't play in the Big Ten championship, but their only loss is to Ohio State, I don't know how you don't put Indiana in.
Yeah, well, from a brand standpoint, they're itching to put Miami in. I can just tell you that, which is not necessarily fair. But to his point again, on talking about the Miami, like even if you dropped as far as Miami did, right, because you lost to the Buckeyes, you're still in the college football playoff territory. You're just not hosting, right? Indiana would have to go to someone. Is that necessarily a bad case scenario that Indiana goes 11-1, loses to the Buckeyes, gets left out of the Big Ten championship because of the tiebreaker, and you still get to play and make the college football playoff?
Yeah, look, as long as, at the end of the day, as long as I'm in.
That seems like a pretty good gig for Kurt Cignetti,
but
year one.
Speaking about a pretty good gig, this guy we're about to bring on, Matt Moscona, he's got a really good gig, even though right now there's a little bit of despair. I don't know if despair is the right word. A lot of disappointment. Let's put it that way.
I'm not mad.
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Matt Moscona, after further review. Matt, first off, thanks for joining us, brother. I know it's been a crazy weekend leading up to a crazy week. At least the Saints won, right? We can say that. But I know a lot of people are asking what happened, and schematically there's a lot of talk. I'm going to tell you just what I saw. We can sit here and talk about scheme. We can talk about, what type of offense you're running or what type of defense you're running, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. What I saw on Saturday is something scarier than that if I'm an LSU fan, this deep into Brian Kelly's tenure. They just had way better players than y'all. I mean, that was just an ass-beating from a personnel standpoint. I don't think schematics was really the main fault there. I think it was the personnel. And Matt, I mean, that to me, how that happens at LSU this far in blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, there was no doubt defensively that's what it was. Brian Kelly's been asked every which way, what did you do for 2 weeks? And he even said on Monday, look, there's really only 2 ways that you're going to defend a running quarterback. I think LSU's coaches know what to do and how to have guys in the right position. The real challenge is you don't have guys up front on the interior that look like NFL players. You did last year with Mason Smith and Jordan Jefferson and Mekhi Wingo. Those guys are all in the NFL right now. You got some young guys that are coming that are really good, but that in between has suffered. And your best guy was Jacobian Guillory. You lost him in the second game of the season. But guys, the real problem's on the back end. They have really struggled in the defensive secondary. The coverage has improved throughout the year, but the run fits and the tackling in the secondary are a problem. And that's why you've seen Marcel Reed, now Jalen Milroe, be able to run like they did. Guys, we can go into how it is, why it is right now, as far as the personnel at those spots. The good news for an LSU fan is the cavalry's on the way because they're recruiting at an exceptional level. They got some really good young players on the team right now, too. But guys, they're getting to the point where you really have to ask, okay, you have the experienced guys on the field because they know where they're supposed to be, that they know what their assignments are. And the younger, more talented guys are on the sideline watching. Do you stomach the mistakes from the young, talented guys because they have the ability to make the really dynamic, physical plays? Or do you keep rolling with guys who are just a step slow?
Yeah. And look, there's some spots where, LSU and Auburn are kind of similar in that way. And to your point, everybody thinks about the back end as just coverage, but they don't understand those safeties and corners and nickels. They keep runs to 10 yards that should go for 60 yards. That's where I think there's a common misconception. Why can Marcel Reed hit the secondary and just be gone and nobody be there? Well, people aren't doing their job. And then Jalen Milroe, who's obviously incredibly talented, is able to extend those runs. And LSU fans are like, oh, my God, like, where are the safeties? This, that, and the other. It just, Cone, we sat there and watched it and talked about it. And I haven't seen LSU just get manhandled like that from a personnel standpoint.
Yeah, it was really something to watch. Matt, there seem to be a number of videos on social media that look like Brian Kelly is complaining to the referees towards the end of the game about Alabama still blitzing defensively. It's one that seems kind of a weird thing to complain about when you're in such a rivalry game like LSU and Alabama. But two, there is a scoring margin differential component to the tiebreaker in the SEC. Seems like that's taken into account. Is that something that happened? Are people making too big of a deal out of that? Or did you have a problem with what Brian Kelly was talking about?
So I didn't even see it real time, and nobody's really talked about it here this week. I did see the clip. There was a play on that drive. By the way, LSU was still trying to score. So Bama has every right to blitz and hit. You were trying to score with 30 seconds, and you did. But it's a very sad touchdown. But you were trying to score, so the defense kept coming. I think with Brian Kelly had a problem, and I'm not carrying water, guys. There was the play where Nussmeier got hit late and he came up hobbling. It was after that play, after that hit, that I think Kelly was probably trying to get a flag for his guy. I don't blame him for going to bat for his guy, but I also think just saying he was complaining about them blitzing, I think that's a misconception.
Gotcha. Okay. So now that you've seen Alabama up close in person, how good do you think they are? The two byes that they've been coming off of, when they played Georgia, the first half, they looked incredible. Coming off of a bye playing LSU, they looked incredible. How good is this team really? Can they win the national championship?
No. Cone, did they look incredible, or is LSU just that terrible at stopping a running quarterback?
Do you think that's what it is?
Well, how did you stop Taylor Green then? Like, that's my thing.
It's a dramatically different responsibility, especially because you had an injured Jaquindon Jackson. But, Jake, I could point to Lenora Sellers at the beginning of the season. They had trouble with him. Marcel Reed, now Milroe. The outlier is what happened at Arkansas.
Oh, no, I know. That's what I'm saying. But it's you've shown the ability, and I get that Jaquindon Jackson, they got another big-ass back that Arkansas has.
I would have
really
bought
good
that.
Player, the freshman.
I would have bought that going into last week, and I did. I was like, hey, look, they did it against Taylor Green. A week later, they got caught off guard with Marcel Reed. Now it's very obvious. That's what you are. Like, you're not good at it. The thing about Bama is, and I know how people know what I feel about Bama, and nobody should take me as no one will take me as objective talking about Bama with the way I've behaved over the last 10 months. But I believe that still firmly. Like, Jalen Milroe missed two wide open receivers that should have been touchdowns. His inability to throw the ball vertically is a problem. I don't think their backs are great. I don't think their offensive line is great. It's funny to say coming off this game, but the truth is, guys, LSU's not great. They beat a Missouri team with Drew Pine playing quarterback. This is also a team that lost to Vanderbilt, that lost to Tennessee, was in a dogfight at home against South Carolina, was in a one-score game at home in the fourth quarter against South Florida, allowed Georgia to come back from a 28-point deficit. Maybe the bigger story, guys, that everybody's got flaws. I mean, maybe that is the real answer, that everybody has real glaring flaws. And Alabama's not immune to that. And I do think they're going to lose again. I don't think they're winning a championship this year.
Well, I think that's what hurt the most for LSU fans, because if anybody knows what Mega Bama looks like, it's LSU fans. It's like, they know when Bama is so much better than everybody else, what it looks like. This is not that Bama team. That's why I think there was that shock and awe after what happened, because you're like, new coach, somewhat flawed team, coming into Baton Rouge. Yeah, we're both a little bit flawed. You know, you got the live tiger there, which I know T-Bob was super excited about, that Jeff Landry brought that live tiger. I know nobody was more excited than importing the tiger from Florida as well. That was a great move when the Monroe Zoo's right down the street. But I think that was the shock and awe, because this isn't Avenger Bama. This isn't Pacific Rim Bama. This is She-Wolf Bama, a good strawberry beer.
But this is also not a great LSU team.
No.
And I don't, guys, like, Jake, go back to the conversation we had at SEC Media Days this year. And the conversation about LSU was, man, breaks fall their way. They get better in some spots. Maybe they could be a 10-2 team and find their way in the back of the playoff, but more likely they're probably a 9-3, 8-4 team. You know, you lose the Heisman winner, 2 first-round picks, a receiver, your Broyles finalist offensive coordinator. You had the worst defense ever a year, literally, in program history. How much better are you? Like, the expectation for this LSU team wasn't to be a championship team. So that's, like, Bama is one conversation. As it pertains to LSU, the bigger question is, when will the roster look like it needs to look to be able to compete for a national championship? Because it's clearly not there now.
Yeah.
So are you willing to pull back, take the 10,000-foot view, and see a path for Brian Kelly to where he can get there? I mean, that's the bigger question around LSU that they have to answer. Guys, if you think the answer is no, you still got a 10-year contract where 90% of that thing is guaranteed. You ain't going nowhere. So you better find the path is really the answer.
Yeah, Matt, and that's what I was looking at. You know, we talk about all these previous LSU coaches who won national championships. Hell, Ed O won one. You know, and I look at this roster for LSU last year. Jaden Daniels. I mean, you just have absolute Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Tyron Lacey, Mason Taylor. You have all these absolute dogs, and the only thing you have to do is put an okay defense on the field, and you couldn't do that. Do you think Brian Kelly missed his boat for a national championship team last year?
Oh, last year for sure. If you had a competent defense, I mean, you guys agree? Like that, they're a playoff team.
Yeah.
I mean, they were the best offense in the country. Like literally, total and scoring offense, they were number one in the country.
The best offense, worst defense. It was an incredible combination.
A competent defense, you're a playoff team at least, and you see how the breaks may fall when you get there. That's not to say, though, Blaine, that he can't get there again. The odd thing is, look, he showed up. It was a terrible situation. We all understand that. It was back-to-back losing seasons. They had like 38 players in that bowl game. And they hit in the portal. They got Jaden, and they hit on some guys in particular in the secondary. Well, all those guys were one-year guys. And so they went back to the portal again last year, and they whiffed on everybody. And that's what happened defensively. All the while he's tried to steadily build through the high school ranks, and they're doing a good job of that. Guys like the 24 signing class, the guys that are freshmen this year, it's a really good class. The class they're about to ink in December might be the best signing class LSU's literally in the era of like the rankings and all that stuff, might be the best class they've ever signed. And then 26 in Louisiana, 6 of the top 70 players in the country are from Louisiana.
Yeah.
So like you can see exactly there's a bumper crop like that in the state every half decade or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see a path. The problem is now you're talking about, okay, well, are you patient enough to get to 2026, 2027, right? Because that may be what it looks like.
Yeah, without a doubt. All right, let's get one in the chat, and then Matt's got to skedaddle.
All right, let's go to Chris. He wants to know.
The word skedaddle.
I can't believe that just came out of my mouth.
All right, let's go to Chris. He says, Matt, do you think LSU is 100% out of the playoffs?
Okay. Guys, do you have a quick second so I could share this with you?
Yeah,
Please.
yes, go ahead.
Love to hear this.
Is it cap scoring margin?
Yeah.
No.
Because
So
you'll need
this
more
is-
than a second.
Yeah, we got the page.
So this is numbers. This is bonkers. But like I was just doing this for my show today. Like literally before I came on with you guys, I was doing this. I was mapping out this segment, prepping this segment. Okay, like what realistically would it take for LSU to get to the playoff? Now they'd have to win the SEC. We agree, right?
Yeah.
Like they can't.
Yes.
Like they're not going as net large. No,
Sure.
right? We all agree there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if they go 6-2 in the league, they have to beat Florida, Vandy, Oklahoma. Not a given, but do we think LSU can do that?
Yes.
Should be favored in all of them.
Okay. That's a better way to say it. They'd be favored. They do that, they get to 6-2. If Georgia beats Tennessee this weekend and Arkansas beats either Texas or Missouri, LSU wins a 7-team tiebreaker of 6-2 teams and goes and plays the winner of Texas A&M.
So wait, say it again.
Yeah.
Because Alabama would need to lose another one, right?
No, Alabama doesn't need to lose because if Alabama goes 6-2 currently, so it would be the fourth tiebreaker. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the cumulative winning percentage of your conference opponent. So like take every team that Alabama's played in the SEC, every team
Yep.
Tennessee's played, every team LSU's played, Missouri, all of them. Take their opponent's cumulative winning percentage. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
And that team would advance.
But point
And right
A
now-
but point A is head-to-head competition.
Would they eliminate the
Right,
head-to-heads
but-
and then group them together?
No. Because it would have to be head-to-head among all the tied teams.
Okay.
And then it would go to the common opponent, but there's no common opponent among all the tied teams. So it would get down to the fourth tiebreaker among these 6, or if Bama's in there, 7 teams. And LSU would have the highest winning percentage among all those teams and would go play the winner of Texas A&M.
So it's possible. Can I just say what this reminds me of for 1 second? This reminds me of, because it's not, the likelihood of that isn't great. I think we can all agree here. This
Do you
is kind of
think
like,
Georgia beats Tennessee?
oh, I think Georgia's going to beat Tennessee.
Do you think Arkansas beats Missouri?
Yes.
Yeah. Right now,
Do
they
you
would be
think-
favored.
Then if LSU wins out, they go to the SEC championship game.
It's wild.
See, I just,
Like, I'm telling you,
man.
here's where I'm, so Matt, give me the teams that would be involved in the tiebreak.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
All right.
And just give me those teams.
Yeah, that's
All
what
right,
I want to know.
I don't want to. Do you want me to tell you I'll tell you the numbers. The numbers are bore people, but I'll tell you
Just the
process if
names.
you want.
I just need the
Okay.
names. Which teams would be involved in that tiebreaker?
LSU,
Okay.
Georgia,
Okay.
the loser of Texas A&M.
Okay. Let's just say Texas for S's and gigs.
Okay, Texas, Missouri,
Okay.
Tennessee, Ole Miss, and then conceivably Alabama.
So would
Hold on.
Missouri,
How is Missouri still in there if they would pick up their third?
if Arkansas were to
So
beat Texas
if
and lose to
Arkan-
Missouri, right?
Correct. But if
Yes.
Arkansas beats Missouri, then Missouri would be out.
Okay.
Dude, there
So
would be
all of those
Bama
teams that I
fans. would,
the 8 teams that I just mentioned, LSU, Georgia, Ole Miss, Bama, Tennessee, Missouri, Texas A&M, Texas. Those 8 teams are all potentially going to finish with 2 losses.
okay.
Have the opportunity.
Yes.
LSU would have the highest cumulative conference opponent winning percentage of those teams and would go play the loser of Texas A&M.
So they wouldn't say, all right, Bama beat LSU,
Because it's no, because it's
Georgia
not-
beat
because the-
Tennessee,
No,
because it may be a
because-
circular firing
Who
squad.
offsets that, though? I'm
Exactly.
wondering, who did
Exactly.
you guys beat? Okay. So what offsets
here's the problem,
Alabama
Cohen. Yeah,
head-to-head?
Colin, Cone, here's the problem.
I can get
Remember,
Colin.
Good.
So here's I combined Cone and problem.
Yeah.
So like LSU didn't
Yeah.
play Mississippi State, who's
Mhm.
0-6.
Mhm.
I see.
They didn't play Kentucky, who's 1-5.
Yeah.
Georgia played them both.
Didn't play
You
Auburn.
see what I mean? They play Auburn. So like LSU didn't play Auburn, Mississippi State, 2 historical games LSU plays every year. They didn't
Yeah.
play this year. And all those teams at the bottom of the league, LSU didn't play. So LSU right now, their SEC opponents' cumulative win-loss record is 26-24 with a winning percentage of 520. The next closest is Georgia at 437, 21-27. Now, oddly, Bama is identical with LSU at 520. But under the scenario I just said, if Arkansas, who LSU played, beats Missouri, who Bama played, then LSU's opponent's cumulative winning percentage would go up.
All right, Matt, last thing I want to say, I know you got to get in here.
Right?
Are you telling me that just by playing Auburn could keep Alabama out of the, regardless of the score?
Kind of, yeah.
Just by showing up and playing the game. Oh my God, I don't think we're it, dude. That's absolute.
Oh man,
you know
there
what?
You
is it
You're
the
welcome.
Vanderbilt game? Is it the Vanderbilt game that offsets the head-to-head with Alabama because Vanderbilt would have beaten Bama and y'all will have?
And I don't know why you're stuck on the head-to-head. I'm talking about 8 teams.
I'm stuck on it because it's point A in the tiebreaker, head-to-head competition among tied teams.
But Cone, it would have to be among all the tied teams. So you're talking about the potential of 6, 7, 8 tied teams. Those 8 didn't all play each other. So
But some of them did. But some of them did, though.
Right. But what Jake said is right because it's circular. Because LSU beat Ole Miss. Well, Ole Miss beat Georgia.
And that's what I'm saying.
Well,
So
Georgia beat
Vanderbilt.
Texas. And so it doesn't matter. Like it would have to be all those teams. Like if Georgia would have beaten all of those teams head to head, then Georgia would advance. But they all didn't play each other. So
and this is why the ACC has a secondary clause for 3 tied teams that's different than the 2 tied teams.
Which that just
you should propose that. You should propose that to the SEC.
I'm still not over the capped relative scoring margin.
Oh, we dove into that, Matt. Hey,
are you kidding me?
Yeah. If you want to try and figure out the end of Interstellar,
seriously, Matt.
I missed the BCS.
You should look it up.
I missed the BCS. Can we go back?
Oh, Matt.
No.
Hey, buddy, I know you got to roll. Thanks so much for hopping in. Tell everybody where they can find you in your beautiful Rubik's Cube of tiebreaker situations.
Bro, how wild is that? Really?
That's wild.
You sneaky bastard.
You're always up to something, man.
Y'all are always up to something.
By the way, I gave that to you before I even gave it to my audience because I'm going on air in 9 minutes.
How about
so you're welcome.
I'm sure they're going to be happy to hear that.
So if you want to hear that again, come join me in 9 minutes on ESPN Radio in Baton Rouge or 1045ESPN.com or the 1045 ESPN YouTube channel. There you go. I give you all your show prep, guys. I gave you great content.
Thank you. All right, Matt. Thanks. Matt Moscona, one of the best. Love you, buddy. One of the best in the business. Speaking about the best in the business, remember the phone lines are open, 1-855-236-3228. Speaking about best in the business, if you want to be the best in the business, you got to be responsible. You don't have to be a man, per se, but you got to be responsible. And what's better than being a responsible man? What is that? How do I do that? How do I attain this responsibility mantra that all these men have? Well, it's pretty simple. You go to responsibleman.com. All right, use code BOOSTER at checkout, and you get a multivitamin that is packed, loaded, shackled, smackled, and spackled with 33 key ingredients that support your immune system. Man, I don't get sick anymore. Sharpen your brain. I don't get sick anymore, and I'm super smart. And keep your heart and muscle strong, because without that, none of the other stuff matters. Our diets today, we know the processed food, all the other stuff that RFK Jr.'s in there trying to figure out right now, it doesn't make for a healthy lifestyle, but you can supplement it. Therefore, harnessing what, David? Responsibility. Be responsible. And right now, you can take advantage of Responsible Man's early access Black Friday sale and get 60% off your order when you go to responsibleman.com and you use code BOOSTER, BOOSTER at checkout. But hurry, this deal won't last long. Remember, gentlemen, a strong America needs strong men. Strong men, start with Responsible Man. Speaking about another thing of responsibility, Steve Sarkisian is responsible for a lot of touchdowns. He's responsible for a lot of witchcraft and a lot of wizardry, and David Cohn is responsible for the Huddle Up segment each week. Let's get together, huddle up, and figure out what witchery Sark had this week. Let's go.
All right, huddle up, Texas fans. Let's get in 21 personnel and go gun, right, tight, sting, H-orbit, extra. This was a big play by Texas against Florida that got a lot of attention last weekend. And before we break it down, let's revisit an earlier huddle up play for Texas against Michigan. Here, Quinn Ewers fakes counter first, then runs end around. And this was a big play right there. So what's a great way to complement that? back to the Florida game. Texas comes out in 21 personnel, so that's 2 running backs, 1 tight end, and we're going to fake the end around first off this orbit motion, then fake our spinner counter back into the boundary, and ultimately hand the football off to Isaiah Bond on the second end around with our first play fake blocking downfield as well as the tight end off that counter bluff motion there. And I'm calling this play extra. I'm not sure what Steve Sarkisian calls it, but we got an X receiver on an end around to the right. All of that means I'm going to call it extra. And by the time we do all that, we're being a bit extra. And I wanted to break this down so that people understand play calling isn't about designing the most complicated plays possible so that you look cool. It's about setting defenses up for one thing and then giving them another with plays that complement each other. Steve Sarkisian was thinking about this design when he made that play call in week 2 against Michigan. And he's thinking about a future opponent in the SEC championship game or the college football playoff when he calls this one. I mean, just think about a couple plays that can complement this. You can throw a screen back to the running back off of that counter, back into the boundary. You could throw double pass with your second end around to your H back or to your Y or even to your Z there who's blocking on this play. Plenty of options, especially when you're the type of play caller that Steve Sarkisian is. This is 21 personnel. Gun right tight sting H orbit extra.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff, David. And, we always say on this show, the best play callers are the guys that set you up in game. They run something in the first quarter. It may get 2 yards. It may get 3 yards. But they're looking at a spot to see how you react in a certain defense. And the third quarter, they call it, and it's a touchdown. But the real sickos, the real just nasty, dirty, grimy savants, wait 3 or 4 games. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like they say the sniper, that some snipers just shoot to kill, and then some snipers shoot to hurt you. So then your friends come over to help, and they shoot them too. Mm-hmm. That's what Sark is. Because if I'm, as a defensive guy, if I'm watching Texas's tape against Michigan, that play that they ran, right, I'm going to put that down in kind of an exotic section. Like, here's some exotic, here's some alternatives. So we're going over, hey, here's one of their kind of trickery type plays. But to have that built off of that goes against everything that you prepared for when you were sitting in that meeting room. Because we used to do the same thing on special teams. I used to see a type of return because on special teams, if you're a kickoff team, you're looking for indicators. And most of the time it happens in the midline. When the right end does this on the kickoff return team, it's going to be a boundary return. When they do this, it's going to be a middle return. Or sometimes the off return will be the indicator. Well, I used to look at what our indicators were because having to coach the kickoff team, I'm looking at other indicators so I know what mine are. And I would change that to counter. And I would have a guy set up like it's a boundary return and it would end up being a field return. It's just absolute nasty.
That's why it's so tough to create an exotic package for play callers like Steve Sarkisian and for Lane Kiffin because they have so many things built off of them that it ends up kind of just becoming everything that you have to game plan for. Yeah. For instance, if they have the counter that they can fake end around and still run counter, well, then that's a version of eye movement and eye discipline that you have to set up for. If they can throw screen back to that running back off of a double reverse look, well, that's something that you have to be prepped for. It's not just like, oh, they may do this once in a while in an exotic package. That's what makes it so tough. Now, this wasn't the biggest play from the biggest game this weekend, but the reason I picked it is because it was going so viral on social media. I wanted people to understand that Steve Sarkisian isn't just sitting there thinking, man, what if it's not like a water boy.
Yeah, it's exactly.
Well, what if I fake to the H, but then we have a double reverse, but it's from the same side? That'll really trick the defenses. No, he set this up a long time ago, and he's setting up something even more diabolical in the future.
Well, exotic package was Blaine's nickname when he worked on that cruise ship for so long.
Yeah.
Never want to go to Taiwan again. That play.
Now I want to go.
God, it's the last time I saw P. Diddy. And freak off.
All right, can we get to the phone calls, David, please?
Oh, man, you never know what you'll see in Taiwan. All right, first one up on the phone lines today. We've got a couple people in Florida. Let's start with Tyler in Florida. What's going on today, man?
I got to be brought in after that conversation. Jeez.
Look, man, good luck.
It's like Miami's defense.
Why am I dancing blindfolded?
Come on. That's too soon.
What's up?
Oh, yeah, well, we got burnt. We finally got burnt, huh?
And all those Miami fans who was talking all the shit in the chat, mighty quiet today. Quiet today.
Well, those
not
guys
you.
are the real ones. Y'all know me. I've been calling in. I've been the only Miami fan for like past 2 years, and all of a sudden starting to hear them now. I don't want to hear it. They ain't real fans.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, you know what? I'm not even mad at the defense because the defense is what it is. I'm kind of upset with the offense. And I get it. The offense wasn't on the field that much at the time, but and I understand Cam Ward is great, but can we hit a check down? Last time I checked, that's legal, correct? I mean, you go back to the last play, Arroyo is wide open 6 yards down the field. Nobody near him.
Yeah.
Y'all said it. I've said it on this show. Peyton Manning and Tom Brady made a living checking down. Because what's it going to do? It's going to suck everybody else up, and then you can hit the pass over the top.
Well, you never go broke making a profit. Y'all had played with fire so much.
Oh, yeah.
Like, eventually you get your hand close enough to the stove, it's going to touch it. And y'all definitely touched it.
Yeah, this game was one that really worried me because of that and because of the style of offense. That I knew they did exactly what I think, Jake, you said it a couple of weeks ago. What you set this team down, keep Cam Ward off the field. He can't score when he's not on the field.
Yeah, and Vanderbilted you. That's what Vandy did to Bama.
That's exactly right. Yep.
But Pavia could throw it. His right arm worked.
That's how bad Miami's defense is.
Like Georgia Tech had a quarterback out there who couldn't throw.
No, they had a guy one guy, Haynes King, couldn't throw.
Because he's injured.
He's injured.
Yeah,
the other guy, Philo, couldn't run.
Yeah.
Because he was injured. You want to talk about tendency?
The easiest, like from a defensive coordinator standpoint, like that's the easiest tendency from a play calling standpoint ever.
Yeah.
And you still find a way to magically lose this game.
Georgia Tech said, "Hey, we're running it right. We're running the end around."
Well,
and Miami still couldn't stop it. Hey,
in all fairness, y'all aren't the first team that can't stop Georgia Tech's counter game.
Yeah, you weren't special. You were just next.
Yeah.
Ask Florida State. I will say it reminded me of what my father used to do when I was playing 9 and 10-year-old baseball, and he would be coaching third. Like, we didn't even have signs. He would just be like, "Steal second base."
Yeah.
When you were on first, he'd be like, "Steal it." That's that's basically what Georgia Tech did.
So Tyler, before you go, So
yes,
what
sir.
now? What now, man? You got Wake Forest at home. You go on the road to Syracuse to finish out the season. You got the most sought-after quarterback in the portal. This was Mario Cristobal's year. You know, what happens moving forward here?
Well, here's the thing. If not this year, is it ever going to happen?
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, Jesus. I mean, good Lord. And I get it. It's not so much the offense's fault, but, I mean, you got to play complementary football.
Well, we just talked about LSU having Jaden Daniels and the rest of Heaven's Army on offense, and they couldn't win it.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know going forward. I mean, after that defensive performance, the Wake Forest game terrifies me with that slow mesh concept. I mean, they don't have
the box. You're about to go against the Boxster, man.
Hey, that Syracuse game ain't going to be a walk in the park up there with Fran Brown and them either.
Been scaring me too.
But
they're swinging around, and that's another thing. We can't cover the pass either.
So I'm wondering.
Can we stop something?
Yeah, if SMU wins out, Clemson and Miami would get the nod, right? That's what we looked at when we were looking at the other day.
Y'all
beat Louisville
the other day.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. That's what's helping us. We are 4-0 against common opponents. They're 3-1. And
there you go. So when you control your own destiny,
for sure.
And then you get there, you got to probably win the ACC championship.
Sometimes, as y'all know, sometimes a loss can be the best thing. Maybe it galvanizes us. I don't know.
We'll see. We'll see. For. But you always galvanize us when you call, Tyler.
Appreciate it, man. Great call.
All right, thanks, Tyler. Let's go to Smoking Gator in Tampa. What's up, Smoking Gator?
Well,
Hello?
Gentlemen, I am indeed Smoking Gator because I am sitting in my back porch smoking a good cigar right now.
Mm-hmm. Mayflower, hopefully.
No, it's not Mayflower. It's an AJ Fernandez. But anyway, I digress. Wanted to give some thoughts about William coming back. So and I'm going to say something, and all the people on the YouTube chat are going to be typing their little fingers away. They're going to say, "David, you idiot, this is not going to happen, blah, blah, blah." Yeah, I know, guys, it's probably not going to happen. That's why it's a hypothetical, okay? So just keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. The only way I see things getting good under Billy Napier, at least next year, will have almost nothing to do with the man himself. The only way I see things getting good next year, possibly, is if DJ Lagway has such a transcendent year that he's able to overcome Billy's deficiencies at, everything. And that happens all the time. We see quarterbacks who are able to transcend who are able to overcome coaches' bad play calling and bad scheme and everything. Jake and Blaine, You guys should know that better than everyone else. When Cam Newton won a championship with Gene Chizik, who was an absolute joke of a head coach, and nobody thought that was going to happen. And how do I know this? And this will be the last thing I say. How do I know this? Because Jake and Blaine, if we were to go back in time to, say, 2009, the year before you guys won the national championship, and someone told you, hey, you guys are going to get this great quarterback, his name is Cam Newton, and he's going to lead you to a national championship, both you guys would have laughed in that person's face.
I'd have called the cops.
You would have said, with Gene Chizik, hell no.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Here's where Florida is right now, it feels like, with Billy Napier.
William, please.
Excuse me, Willie. It feels like they were on a ship out in the ocean and like the ship sunk and you're just floating out in the ocean and you only have a limited amount of time. You can't drink the water.
No life.
The ocean water. That's like you're on a raft.
Okay.
Either you're going to hear that and see that ship off in the distance. It's going to come save you. Or you're going to die. It's to that point. It's that drastic next year.
It blows my mind.
Is DJ Lagway the ship?
We talk about just like, a quarterback can come fix Billy Napier. Do we not know the quarterbacks Billy Napier has had at Florida?
Yeah.
I mean, Graham Mertz.
Anthony Richardson.
Pretty good. I'd say Graham Mertz. You had Anthony Richardson, who's right now the playing for the Colts. Like, if people think DJ Lagway is just going to come in and magically fix Florida for you, well, there's a nice beach property I can sell you in the middle of Iowa. It's not going to happen. I don't know what Florida fans are holding on to. The only reason Billy Napier is not fired is because he has a $26 million buyout. You're not balling in recruiting. Like, what great thing can we hold on to as a Florida fan? I will sit here and wait. I will wait. If you can tell me, please.
I think it's multiple things.
Okay.
But they need multiple things to get fixed to fix their football team. I agree with you 100% on that. I do.
Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Evan.
Thanks for calling.
Great call, man.
Better days ahead. Hopefully. Maybe. I don't know.
Depends on if that ship.
Let's go to Florida's hot today. Let's go to Cameron in Florida. Cameron, what's up?
Cameron?
Oh, hey.
What's up?
Sorry.
You're good.
Okay, so I have a question about the Georgia Bulldogs. So if everything goes right, it'll come down between Texas A&M, and Georgia for the last 3 spots. So Texas will be 7-1 in conference play, and they'll get into the conference championship. But Texas A&M and Georgia will both be 6-2. But there's no tiebreaker because they don't play each other, right?
Well,
so
it's
how is it going to decide?
There is a tiebreaker. If that were to happen and Texas were to beat Texas A&M and Texas would get into the SEC championship game, then you've got a situation where you have a 2-loss LSU, a 2-loss Alabama, a 2-loss Tennessee, a 2-loss Georgia.
Right.
I think that's a scenario that Matt Moscona just laid out. I think that's when you get that tiebreaker of all those 2 teams.
Yeah, but
if Tennessee beats Georgia, this thing's a wrap. It's going to be the winner of the A&M Texas game. That's what's going to happen.
And this is why I was saying on the head-to-head point here, like, again, the first point is head-to-head competition amongst the tied teams. It doesn't like have a qualifier that says, and, you automatically skip to the next point. What I'm saying is if Alabama beat LSU, which they did, it doesn't say, like, Vanderbilt beat Alabama, but LSU would have beaten Vanderbilt later in the season in Matt Moscona's thing. But Vanderbilt won't be one of the tied teams that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So how does all that come into play? Or do you automatically just skip to the next point if teams are 6-2?
Well, that's what I was asking. In the process of elimination, do you look at the head-to-head of the teams that are left?
That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Does the process of eliminate, because it doesn't expound on that on the SEC's website.
So if you've got, in that case, if you have Bama, you have A&M, you have LSU, you have Tennessee, you have Georgia, and he said what?
The loser of the Texas A&M and Texas.
The loser of the Texas. So let's say you got A&M in there. So you have those 4 teams. Bama beat LSU. Tennessee beat Bama. Bama beat Georgia. A&M beat LSU. So I think it does turn into a circular firing squad of this team beat that team beat this team. Since that's the case, you all go and move to the next tiebreaker. I don't know if that's the rule or not.
See, and I don't know either. That's a good point, is what's the order of operations on this? Do
Yes.
all of those teams that are tied move on to point B, or can you eliminate one or two of them because of head-to-head and then move on to the next one? It doesn't expound on that on the website, so I'm just wondering how Matt just automatically assumes, or maybe he has inside information on this, or maybe there's another appendix just like there is for capped relative scoring margin. But an answer on that would determine whether or not all of the teams move to point B or whether or not a couple of them are moved out, and then you go to record versus common conference.
Do you either trim the fat and move on or keep everybody?
Exactly.
That's the question, Cameron. We don't know.
Great call, man.
Thanks, man. All right, let's go to Josh in North Carolina. Josh, what's up?
Hey, guys, what's up?
What's up, man? Congrats.
Thank you. I have a funny story about the proposal. So I invited all of our family to come out, and I knew they were there. She didn't, and I'm walking, and I'm talking, and then I look over my head, look over behind my back the first time. I don't see anybody. And then I look again, and I don't see anybody. By the third time, she mentions, she's like, is there somebody behind us? And then it makes me start to laugh. I'm like, well, I got to get out the ring. I get out the ring, and I get down on one knee, and I say, will you marry me? And then she looks at the box and says, it's upside down. And then I look, and I'm like, oh, crap. Stop looking around.
See, that's when that's when you make like a funny joke to like switch it up.
It's almost like losing. Losing Arkansas.
That's when you say like, yeah, because you turned my life right side up.
Okay, there we go.
See what I'm saying? You got to think. I will say on my proposal, it was in Tuscaloosa where my mother-in-law lived, and make your scoff. Some things are bigger, Blaine. Grow up, Peter Pan. Anyways, so I got all this family that's coming. And I'm driving Reed to the restaurant to propose to her. And her mom told her that she was going to do something else or whatever. And so all of a sudden we're pulling up to the restaurant and her mom's car is right in front of us. And she's like, why is my mom here at the restaurant?
What a coincidence.
I was like, I don't know. I was speechless.
Yes,
I was speechless. So, anyways, I feel your pain on that one.
David,
buddy.
do you have any cool proposal stories or?
Look, man, I recorded mine so you can watch it.
Really?
Cool,
nice.
Recorded it. It was on my birthday, so I said I'm just recording this to send a thank you to my parents for any birthday presents. But really,
well played, sir.
I had the ring inside of a birthday present.
Maybe I'll have a cool one day.
You will.
Yeah, you will.
You will. Congrats, Josh.
Now that it's legal in most of the states.
Are y'all gonna beat Georgia or what? Or you're a Tennessee fan, right? Sometimes I get confused.
Yeah, I mean, I think I tweeted this. I said this is going to be the game where either Georgia wins by 17 or Tennessee wins off the last-second field goal. I don't know which will happen.
Under.
What's going to happen in Knoxville if y'all beat Georgia and Alabama in the same year?
It'll burn to the ground, most likely.
And you know what?
In a good way.
In a good way.
Sometimes it needs to.
Sometimes it does need to.
Sure.
It'll never get better than this.
100%.
It'll never get better.
All
right, Josh. Thanks, buddy.
Great call, man.
Go to the chat for a second.
All right, let's go to a $5 donation from the Hall. Appreciate it, man. He says, record versus all-conference opponent, tied teams. I think would only move on if there is a tied record. 7-team time would be Bama 3-1 or A&M 2-0.
Yeah, I am just stuck on, do you eliminate teams that there's a head-to-head unless it all, again, works out where there's 4 teams and they all beat each other evenly, and then you can't move on, right? That's what I don't know.
$5 donation from Miles. Appreciate it, Miles. He says, rule 1, never trust Matt Moscona.
All right.
Huh.
I don't know. There's something about Moscona's face I trust.
I do too, but that's why I'm wondering how he got to just automatically go into point
Maybe
B.
he's just trying to put that out there, to put it in the ethos, to like.
Because if he's right, if it's like, hey, you're 6-2, yeah, you lost the head-to-head, but it doesn't matter because you have the same number of conference losses, and you go down to these other points, then yes, it's very feasible that LSU could win the rest of their games and find themselves in that scenario.
Yeah, I just, it made me, when he was explaining that, it sounded to me like what CNN and MSNBC sounded like when they were trying to like make people believe Kamala Harris could still win. That's what it sounded. They're like, whoa, guys, there's a batch.
It does this electorally in Hawaii and Wyoming, and they come together, and there's a provisional ballot, and
That's just what it sounded like to me.
All right, let's go to the Buff. He says, guys, I want to get your opinion on what Prime has done for Colorado so far, and do you think Colorado will make it to the playoffs?
They could.
I mean, they could. You got to win the Big 12. I mean, at this point, I think there's only one Big 12 and one ACC team most likely to get in if Notre Dame gets in. But again, like we said on the show, you can like the way Prime does stuff. You can not like it. You can like the way Kirk Cignetti, because Prime's not the only one that's confident in what he does. There's a lot of coaches that do it. His name's just bigger than the other ones. My biggest compliment I can give to Colorado is you were able to find a way. We can talk about the Big 12 being down, because I think it is at the top. I mean, look who we're talking about winning it. But Prime was able to improve Colorado at the spots that we knew they had to improve, but it's very hard to make that change quickly, and that's on the line of scrimmage. That typically takes a little more time. Not that Colorado's elite on the line of scrimmage, but they're good enough to let their elite pieces, Shadur and Travis and some of the skill players they got, be able to keep them in games, even though they might not be running the ball as well as some other teams can. So I think you got to give Prime all the credit in the world for recognizing a weakness, attacking a weakness, and not turning it into a strength, but turning it into a stalemate in most cases, which when you have the ornaments on the tree that he does at the skill position, that can give you a lot of success.
And Colorado's in an interesting spot because, before Kansas State lost to Houston and picked up that second conference loss, Kansas State had the head-to-head, just like we're talking about, the head-to-head over Colorado, and there could be a situation where Colorado wins out, goes 10-2, but didn't make the Big 12 championship game. And that was interesting because we said, hey, how will the committee value a 10-2 Colorado team that hasn't beaten any ranked opponent? And the only ranked opponent they did play at the time, Kansas State, they lost to, but Deion Sanders is a big brand. How will they value that? Well, now Kansas State has picked up that second loss. Colorado finds themselves in a position to be number 2 in the conference behind BYU, which means unless you lose another game, you're going to be in the conference championship, which means you could win it and potentially get a bye, or lose it and pick up a third loss. Now, how will the committee value a 10-3 Colorado team that did make the Big 12 championship game but lost?
That's the question, and that's why we had Colorado in our first 4 out. There's a reason they were in there, even though they may not have the best resume or schedule when compared to some of the others.
Let's go to Taylor Holland. What's up, man? He said, would you consider Alex Atkins on a revenge tour for the University of Florida as the OC? Great recruiter, and we need offensive linemen.
I mean, you're going to have to make some changes. I mean, if we're talking about a revenge tour, do I think he's going to be motivated? Yes, if that's the case. And again, we can talk about quarterback, and Blaine brought up there's a lot more than just DJ Lagway that needs to help you out, and that is up front, right? That's, again, where the game is won and lost. So if you can improve there, it's going to improve everything around you.
Let's go to CD. He says, boys. I watched true freshman Jordan Seaton drive a Texas Tech D lineman 6 yards in the end zone on a touchdown last weekend. The O-line is much better this year, and the D-line is improving. Could they win a couple playoff games?
I don't know if they could win a couple playoff games. I think they could win one depending on the matchup, just because they can stalemate. But there's a reason that Jordan Seaton was the number 1 overall offensive lineman in the country, and that was such a big get for them. But it's not just Jordan Seaton. It's the depth that they've put around them that they've been able to coach up and turn into quality depth, because that's how it works in a college football season. All right, we're going to get back to the chat, get back to the rest of the donos. Calls are done. Let's get to bets for today. And we got some action, boys.
Come on.
Let's go ahead and throw mine up there. I'm going to go Central Michigan, Toledo, over 52 at -110. I think we're going to get a lot of points in that game. And then I'm going to go with Cone's former mentor, Scott Leffler, with a big chaw in and a big mindset. Give me Bowling Green -9.5. That's going off at -110.
All right, I like it. I'm actually going to take Western Michigan plus 10.5. I do think Bowling Green wins, but I'll take the points there. It's a couple alt spreads for me today, and the line on that is -134. And then give me Toledo. I bought this one down a point, so Toledo -13.5, -136.
Okay, I love it. Weird NFL game yesterday. Extremely weird. Watching the Rams kick 5 field goals, I just didn't know how I felt about that. But today, a little college action, man. Give me Central Michigan plus 14.5. That's going off at -110. I'm feeling the under in the Ball State Buffalo game at 54.5. That's also going off at -110.
All right, Ace is going to take Buffalo -3.5 tonight at -112, and then the Western Michigan Bowling Green over at 57.5. That's going off at -108. All right, let's get to these donuts.
All right, if you donated today, guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate it on this side. Let's go to a $5 donation from Brock. Appreciate it, Brock. Says, guys, you see BK staying at LSU for more than 2 years.
Yes, I do. There's no chance they're going to fire him. I don't think he's going to take another job. It'd be a pretty bad look. It's not like there's, many other places that, you have better resources and availability to recruit than LSU. And, Moscona brought up that contract. So, I do.
$5 donation from Miller. Appreciate it. Says Indiana over Texas. They have a common opponent. Texas has a weak schedule, and Indiana has a weaker one. At least be logically consistent.
Was it? Say it one more time.
Indiana over Texas. They have a common opponent. Texas has a weak schedule, and Indiana has a weaker one. At least be logically consistent.
Yeah, but Indiana doesn't have a loss.
Doesn't have a loss.
What
are you talking about?
Okay, if they lose to the Buckeyes, then they're in the Texas camp.
Then we can go there.
That's why I was saying. So if they lose to the Buckeyes, they're in the Texas camp and in the Penn State camp, where you lost to the best team you played against. What I was talking about with Miami is they'd probably fall that many spots, though, right? Like 6 spots, I would assume.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, they lose to the Buckeyes on the road by 1 point.
Well, see, it's amazing. You don't say BYU in that either. So, if we were going to logically go about it that way, then you would put Texas in front of BYU and Indiana, even though BYU has a better schedule than Indiana. And when you look at Texas has a better schedule than them. But we're not comparing like entities here. If, again, like David said, if they both had 1 loss, you're exactly right, because that's logical. But it's not logical when one team is undefeated and they're one of the 3 undefeated teams left in college football that play in a power conference, and they're going to have to play the number 2 team that's coming up. So we're not being illogical. Your logic is just flawed, probably because you're a fan of Texas and you want that to be true.
Also, with Texas having a loss, they're still only 3 spots behind Indiana, who's undefeated. And if Texas beats Georgia, they're the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah.
Right? They would be ranked number 1 over Oregon right now.
I agree.
Let's go to a $5 donation from the new. Appreciate it, man. It says, so do I have this right? 4 from the Big 10, 4 from the SEC, 1 from the ACC, 1 from the Big 12. That leaves 2. Notre Dame, Colorado are who?
Is he talking about from our ranking?
I believe so.
Because our ranking, keep in mind, we didn't rank a group of 5 team.
No, we're just giving you the best 12 teams. As far as who's going to get in, I'm telling you right now, I think the Big Ten's going to get in 4. I think the SEC is going to get in 4, and that includes the conference champion in both of those. If Notre Dame gets in, because a group of 5 team has to get in, I don't think more than 1 team. I think the conference champion out of the ACC and the Big 12 are going to be in. That's just the way that when I look at the math, I mean, that would mean it came down to Bama, Georgia, and Texas, 2 spots for 3. I mean, that's the way it's looking to me right now.
The way that it could work is if, say, Colorado, like we just talked about at 10-2, beats an undefeated BYU team.
Then do they put BYU in?
And maybe they weigh a 12. At that point, it would be a 12-1 BYU team over like a 10-2 SEC team.
Maybe that's the only way. It's just that's knowing the way these people operate. If Colorado was undefeated and lost the Big 12 championship and they lost it to BYU, I could see that because Colorado has prime and they want prime in the playoff. But with the reverse role, I don't know.
$3 donation from Hunter. Appreciate it, man. He says, if LSU makes it to the SEC championship, this system is broken and it needs to be thrown away and fixed.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
I mean,
people are going to miss divisions, man.
Yeah, it's I'm glad that the schedule's open up. I was a favorite getting rid of divisions, and I hope that if it does come down to like a 6-team tiebreaker, this is one of the only years that we have it, and it just be a coincidence it was in the first one.
$20 donation from David Cohn for Prez. Appreciate it. Last time Vols beat our Big 3 rivals in the same season, Florida Bama UGA, was 20 years ago. Kiffin, Dooley, Butch, and Pruitt, none could do it. Fans and recruit judge the coach and program based on those 3. Heupel has his chance.
Yeah, I mean, it's
funny Vanderbilt's not in there. What if they beat all 3 of those teams and you lose to your in-state?
Do you know how many Tennessee fans I've had message me like, I am scared to death of this Vanderbilt game?
They're good, man.
$5 donation from Blake Bronneman. Appreciate it, Blake. Very off topic, but I need y'all's input to settle an argument with buddies. Would you have a better chance of survival against a crocodile or an anaconda? In water, I'm guessing.
In the water? God.
How big's the anaconda, man?
We'll say max.
Are we talking about
We'll talk about both max.
Both
max
to
size.
survive a crocodile or the minute that anaconda grabs you, you're cooked.
Are you though?
Yeah,
because it still has to get around you.
It does, but God, it can. I don't know. I just think about that Ice Cube and J-Lo movie. That is tough. Like that crocodile, maybe you can, gouge it in the eyes or punch it in the snout. I've heard of people surviving crocodiles. I've never heard somebody survive an anaconda attack. I mean, how many times you ever turned it on? They're like, "Hi, my name is Bill. I'm from West Virginia, and I survived an anaconda attack."
All right.
Not a lot.
Average anaconda size.
Yeah, look at that one.
Is it a picture of me?
There's a green anaconda and a yellow anaconda.
Oh, both of those sound
Green
awful.
anaconda, 18 feet.
Oh,
They can grow up to 30.
I'm out.
Adult females usually around 15 and a half feet long.
And they're always pissed.
They're always
weighing
so
up to
pissed.
550.
yeah, give me the croc. Give me the croc. Actually, give me neither of them. That's why I don't go in the water.
Let's go to a $5 donation from Bayou Ben. Appreciate it, man. He says, I hate Brian Kelly. Get him out of here. I'm done with him.
There's a lot of look. I understand being disappointed, right? But if I was an LSU fan, I would be more disappointed in blowing the season last year because the defense was so bad. And I get it. They had Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson on the same team. If anybody can reignite that three-headed monster, it's LSU. They've done it twice. It's just, damn, Jaden Daniels was so good. And so was Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. And that defense just don't be the worst. Like, that's the thing that's got to suck.
Yeah.
Just don't be the worst. Be like the 10th
LSU
worst.
team that won the national championship.
Yeah, like
They were phenomenal on offense. They had a couple guys on defense, but they weren't great.
Yeah.
So, let's go to a $5 donation from David. Appreciate it, David. Blaine, I forgot. Florida's not going to win 9 games, so I have to honor my bet. Next time I call in, I will sing the FSU war chant. #Cy. You better, buddy. Let's go to a $2 donation from David's favorite Badger. Hey, Cone, Wisconsin's beating Oregon again. You better start rooting for us. I believe that's all.
That can make things interesting.
Yeah.
Oregon picking up a loss? As if they're not interesting enough already.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to this poll. Will Brian Kelly win a national championship at LSU?
No.
Yes. LSU fans are pissed.
No.
They're going to say no. David, what percentage do you think?
62.
I'm going to say 71.
No, 76%.
They're pissed.
Ish don't think so.
Yeah, they're pissed. And then the other fan bases are.
They already hate him. Yeah, that's good logic.
It's a double. All right, we appreciate everybody. Thanks for the few that called in. Thanks for the donos. Got a great show for you tomorrow with Tim Brando. Make sure you check out Game Time, taking the guesswork out of tickets. Then Responsible Man. We all know it's time you grow up. Get those multivitamins. You need them. And like the chances of LSU fans being okay with Brian Kelly tonight, we're going. Gone.
Nice catch, good.
See, it's all about the throw.
Yeah, it's all right.